They thought I wouldn't notice. For 5 years, my boss underpaid me, stealing from my paycheck just to shower his mistress with gifts. But the day I uncovered his secret, everything flipped, and now nearly $2 million in licensing fees drains from their accounts every day, and it all lands in mine. Hi, my name is Madison Cole, I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how humiliation turned into the sweetest revenge I could ever imagine. I stared at my paycheck for the 100th time, feeling my stomach drop into a familiar pit of despair. 5 years in this company, leading projects no one else could handle, working 60-hour weeks without complaint, and yet my salary was actually lower than the new hires walking through our doors. The numbers didn't make any sense, no matter how many times I crunched them. I'd built systems that brought in millions of dollars annually, designed platforms that other companies tried to copy, but I was earning peanuts compared to industry standards. The worst part was that I couldn't leave. The non-compete clause in my contract made it impossible to jump ship without losing all rights to my system. When I finally worked up the courage to confront HR about the glaring pay discrepancy, they just smirked at me like I was some kind of joke. Be grateful, Madison. Some people would kill for your job, the HR manager said with a dismissive wave of her manicured hand. I walked out of that sterile meeting room feeling completely humiliated and worthless, but something deep inside me had fundamentally changed. I wasn't going to take this disrespect lying down anymore. The office was always buzzing with whispers and speculation about my boss, Richard Hale. He was the kind of man who could charm absolutely anyone during client meetings and board presentations, but turned completely ruthless and cold the moment those polished conference room doors closed behind him. He had this particular way of making you feel incredibly small and insignificant with just a single look or dismissive gesture. But the most interesting rumor constantly floating around the water cooler was about his secret mistress. Word was, he had a girlfriend named Vanessa who was literally half his age, and she had suddenly started driving a brand new white BMW and wearing designer clothes that cost more than my entire monthly salary combined. I laughed it off at first, thinking it was just typical office gossip and speculation. People always needed something juicy to talk about during their lunch breaks. But then I kept looking at my pay stubs again and again, and those frustrating numbers kept bothering me like an itch I couldn't scratch. Something wasn't adding up here, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was missing a much bigger picture that would explain everything. One Friday evening in late October, I was working late as usual while the rest of the office had already cleared out for their weekend plans. The building was completely empty except for the night cleaning crew making their rounds with their vacuum cleaners and trash bins. I was passing by the main conference room when I noticed that Richard's expensive laptop was left wide open on the wooden table. He'd been on a rushed video call with overseas clients, and IT had been running their evening backup sync. He must have stepped out during the technical delay and forgotten about it in his typical Friday rush to leave early. Curiosity got the absolute best of me, and I couldn't resist taking just a quick peek at what was displayed on his screen. What I saw there made my blood freeze solid in my veins. There was a detailed spreadsheet open with multiple tabs, and one was labeled clearly as V Expenses, in bold red letters. Every single month for the past several years, substantial amounts of money flowed directly into this mysterious account, and when I quickly did the mental math, it was exactly the precise amount I'd been systematically underpaid over all these years. My hands started shaking uncontrollably as the horrible reality hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just standard underpaying practices, this was outright theft, plain and simple. The betrayal hit me like a devastating physical punch directly to my gut, knocking all the wind out of my lungs. Richard wasn't just casually underpaying me out of corporate greed, he was literally and systematically redirecting my rightful salary to spoil his pampered mistress in the most calculated way possible. The evidence was right there in black and white, spread across multiple spreadsheet columns with dates and amounts. Luxury designer handbags from boutiques I couldn't afford to window shop at, private weekend trips to expensive resorts, weekly spa treatments, monthly shopping sprees, and even a substantial down payment for Vanessa's brand new downtown condo. All of it was being funded directly by money that should have been deposited into my own struggling bank account every 2 weeks. I quickly snapped several photos of the incriminating screen with my trembling phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the device steady enough to get clear pictures. My heart was pounding like a drum in my chest, but underneath the initial shock and disbelief, I felt my resolve growing stronger and more determined than it had ever been in my entire life. This wasn't just about the stolen money anymore. This had become a matter of basic justice and human dignity that needed to be addressed. I didn't storm into Richard's luxurious corner office the following Monday morning screaming accusations. I didn't throw a dramatic tantrum or make threats like he probably expected most people would do in my situation. Instead, I made the calculated decision to play completely dumb and naive. Every forced smile I gave him during our morning meetings, every polite, "Thank you," I choked out when he gave me additional work, every respectful nod during his condescending lectures was nothing but an elaborate mask carefully hiding my true intentions and growing rage. Inside my head, I was methodically and systematically documenting everything I could possibly get my hands on. As the architect of the company's main system, I had quiet admin-level access to server logs and financial databases that Richard had completely overlooked when he set up his scheme. Every suspicious payroll edit, every questionable invoice that didn't make business sense, every single trace that connected Vanessa's increasingly luxurious lifestyle to company funds that rightfully belonged to me. I started staying late every single night, not to work overtime on company projects, but to dig deeper and deeper into the financial records using my legitimate system access. I was building an ironclad legal case against Richard piece by piece, document by document, and he had absolutely no idea what kind of storm was brewing right under his arrogant nose. Weeks passed by in this strange double life, and the more I investigated and documented, the more incredibly careless and sloppy Richard's criminal actions appeared to be. He'd gotten so comfortable and overconfident with his embezzlement scheme that he barely even tried to hide the evidence anymore. I found dozens of emails with his official digital signature approving completely fake, consulting fees, for Vanessa that had no business purpose whatsoever. Credit card receipts tied directly to company expense accounts showed her frequent shopping sprees at high-end boutiques and jewelry stores. Hotel bookings for their romantic weekend getaways were being charged directly to business expense categories that made no sense. Travel expenses for trips that had nothing to do with company business were being approved with Richard's personal authorization codes. He genuinely thought he was completely untouchable because he held the position of power, but he had no idea that I was quietly building a comprehensive file thick enough to bury him 6 feet under the courthouse. Every piece of damning evidence was meticulously organized, thoroughly indexed, and backed up in multiple secure locations. Richard's overwhelming arrogance and sense of invincibility was going to be his ultimate downfall, and I was going to be the one to push him off that cliff he'd built for himself. My real breakthrough and turning point came when I was digging through dusty old employment files stored in the company archives basement. I stumbled across my original employment contract from 5 years ago, yellowed with age and buried under stacks of other paperwork. I decided to read through every single page carefully for the first time since I'd originally signed it. Buried deep in the dense legal jargon on page 14, section 7, was a clause that made my heart skip several beats when I finally understood its implications. It clearly stated that if any proven financial misconduct by company leadership caused systematic underpayment to an employee, that affected employee would be legally entitled to full restitution of all stolen wages plus percentage rights to revenue generated by systems they had built during their employment period. The clause was originally meant as protection for senior developers against exploitation by corporate executives. It had seemed purely symbolic when I signed it, until Richard's misconduct activated it. I had to read those crucial sentences 3 times very slowly to make absolutely sure I wasn't imagining or misunderstanding the legal language. My jaw dropped open as the massive implications of this discovery hit me like lightning. This wasn't just about getting my stolen money back through a lawsuit. This clause could potentially change my entire life forever. That technological system, my system that I designed from scratch, was the absolute backbone of everything the company did to generate revenue. Billions of dollars in client contracts flowed through it every single day without fail. Every transaction, every client interaction, every piece of business that kept the company profitable went through the sophisticated platform I had personally designed, coded, and built from the ground up using my own expertise and countless hours of unpaid overtime. If this powerful contract clause activated due to Richard's proven financial misconduct, the company would legally owe me substantial ongoing royalties for every dollar that processed through my intellectual property. We weren't talking about small change or pocket money here. This could potentially amount to millions of dollars flowing into my accounts on a regular basis. Suddenly, Richard's betrayal and systematic theft wasn't just a personal attack on my dignity anymore. His criminal behavior had accidentally handed me the legal tools and leverage I needed to achieve complete financial freedom for the rest of my life. The irony was almost too perfect and poetic to believe. The man who had tried so hard to keep me financially struggling had unknowingly given me the key to becoming wealthier than he could ever dream of being. I spent the next several days carefully printing out every single piece of incriminating evidence I'd collected over the past weeks using my legitimate system access. Detailed payroll logs clearly showing the systematic discrepancies, Vanessa's itemized expense reports with Richard's digital approvals, lengthy email chains discussing the special financial arrangements using coded language, internal ledger reports showing fund transfers, and of course my original employment contract with that golden clause highlighted in bright yellow marker. I organized absolutely everything into several thick 3-ring binders, creating a comprehensive legal case that would be impossible to dispute or dismiss. I made multiple copies of everything, hiding one complete set at my apartment and another in a safety deposit box at my bank. I started replying to Richard's emails with careful politeness, knowing every line might one day sit in front of a judge. My coworkers and colleagues started noticing subtle changes in my behavior during team meetings and lunch breaks. "Are you feeling okay, Madison? You seem different lately," they would ask with genuine concern in their voices. I would just smile mysteriously and give them a cryptic response, just watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment. If they only knew what kind of legal and financial storm was about to completely devastate this place, they would understand perfectly why I seemed so calm, focused, and mysteriously confident about my future. Richard continued to strut around the office like he owned the entire world, and in many ways, he absolutely did control everything around here. The most infuriating part of my daily routine was being forced to watch him with Vanessa whenever she would visit the office to meet him for lunch dates. She'd walk through our professional workplace wearing clothes and jewelry that cost more than most people's annual car payments, and Richard would keep his possessive hand on her tiny waist like she was some kind of expensive trophy he'd won. She would smirk at me with obvious disdain, like she was the queen of some castle and I was just a lowly peasant who should feel grateful to even be in her magnificent presence. I wanted to burst out laughing at the complete absurdity of the entire situation. This spoiled woman had absolutely no idea that her entire luxury lifestyle was being built on money stolen directly from my paychecks over the past 5 years. She was living it up and showing off using my hard-earned money, and very soon, the expensive bill for all of this stolen luxury was going to come due with substantial interest and legal consequences that would shock both of them to their cores. The perfect opportunity I'd been patiently waiting for finally presented itself at the monthly board meeting in November. Richard was completely in his element, standing confidently at the head of the polished conference table boasting about company growth statistics and record quarterly profits. He was smoothly glossing over obvious budget discrepancies like they were just minor accounting errors, spinning absolutely everything to make himself look like some kind of financial genius and irreplaceable business leader. My heart was pounding so incredibly hard I was convinced everyone in the room could hear it echoing, but I kept my facial expression completely calm and professional. When he paused dramatically to take a sip from his expensive water bottle, I slowly and deliberately raised my hand to get attention. "Excuse me, Richard. I believe the board should examine something extremely important before we continue with this meeting, I announced in a clear, steady voice. The entire room went completely silent as I slid my thick, organized binder across the polished wooden table toward the surprised board members. You literally could have heard a pin drop in that tense moment. Every eye in the room was now focused on that binder and what secrets it might contain. The board members began flipping through the pages with increasing urgency, their facial expressions rapidly changing from mild curiosity to complete shock to outright disbelief and anger. Page after page revealed the ugly, undeniable truth of Richard's systematic betrayal and criminal financial misconduct. Vanessa's name tied directly to company funds with clear paper trails, Richard's official digital signatures approving obviously fraudulent expenses that served no business purpose, my pay stubs compared side by side with industry salary standards showing years of deliberate and calculated underpayment. Internal transaction reports and general ledger records showing suspicious fund transfers. The board executives stared at the overwhelming evidence with wide eyes, some of them muttering shocked comments under their breath and shaking their heads in disbelief. Richard's face drained of all color as he realized exactly what was happening and how completely trapped he was. Outside in the hallway, I could hear Vanessa's high heels clicking as she paced, waiting for him to finish what she thought was just another boring business meeting. The power dynamic in that room shifted so dramatically and quickly it was almost comical to watch. The king was about to lose his crown, and absolutely everyone could see it happening in real time. Richard tried desperately to laugh off the serious accusations, but his voice was noticeably shaky and completely unconvincing to everyone listening. She's clearly exaggerating and misinterpreting standard business practices here. This is just creative accounting, nothing more than normal corporate financial management, he stammered while nervously loosening his expensive silk tie. But then I calmly pulled out my phone and showed the board members the email that would completely seal his fate forever. It was Richard's official approval for Vanessa's condo down payment, $450,000 of company money, digitally signed and sent at exactly 12:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night from his personal company email account. The timestamp proved beyond any doubt that he was trying to hide this transaction outside normal business hours when no one would be monitoring the accounts. Audible gasps filled the conference room. There was absolutely no possible way to spin or explain this massive payment as a legitimate business expense. The board members looked at Richard like he was a complete stranger they'd never seen before in their lives. His credibility was destroyed in that single moment, and everyone knew it. The board demanded immediate and detailed answers, but Richard could only stammer incoherently and sweat through his expensive business suit. I leaned back confidently in my leather chair and spoke in a soft but steady voice that somehow commanded everyone's complete attention. I strongly suggest you immediately check the specific clause in my original employment contract. Page 14, Section 7 contains some very relevant legal language, I announced with quiet confidence. The board members frantically flipped to that exact page, and I watched with satisfaction as their faces changed when they read those crucial words that would change everything forever. Their jaws dropped open one by one as they fully realized the massive legal and financial implications of what they were reading. Richard was completely finished, and he knew it. The best part was that he had done this entirely to himself through his own greed and arrogance. Meanwhile, we could all hear Vanessa outside getting impatient, completely unaware that her luxury lifestyle was about to come crashing down around her. The board immediately called for an emergency recess to consult with their legal team about this unprecedented situation. Over the next several days, their lead counsel confirmed the clause was completely enforceable under corporate law. Within days, the board had no choice but to acknowledge their legal obligation. Every single day, the technological system I had built from scratch processed millions of dollars in transactions for the company's daily operations. With Richard's financial crimes thoroughly documented and verified by independent board review, the company was now legally obligated to pay me complete restitution for 5 years of systematically stolen wages plus substantial ongoing daily payments for system usage. From that moment, they were on the hook for massive payments that would continue indefinitely. Suddenly, I wasn't the powerless victim anymore. I was the legal owner of their technological lifeline that they absolutely could not survive without. The sophisticated platform they depended on for basic daily operations now belonged to me in the most legally binding way possible under Co. Years making me feel worthless and insignificant, but now the tables had turned completely and permanently. I held all the cards, and he was the one desperately begging for mercy and forgiveness. Richard stormed out of the conference room, visible sweat stains on his forehead and his expensive business suit wrinkled from stress and panic. I followed him quietly into the hallway, clutching my organized binder to my chest like a protective shield. He spun around to face me with wild desperation and rage in his eyes. "You think the board will side with you forever?" he hissed through gritted teeth, pointing his finger at me accusingly. "They'll chew you up just like they did me. You have no idea what corporate politics can do to someone like you." I looked him straight in the eye with complete calmness, smiled confidently, and delivered the line I'd been waiting 5 long years to say. "Actually, Richard, the difference is that they need me. They never needed you, you just convinced them they did." The look of complete defeated shock on his face was worth every single moment of humiliation and disrespect I'd endured over the years. Behind him, I could see Vanessa finally understanding that something had gone terribly wrong as she watched security approach with empty boxes for his office. What do you think Richard's next desperate move was? Let me know your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you're absolutely loving this incredible story of workplace revenge and justice. The public fallout began within just a few days, and it was more spectacular and devastating than I could have ever imagined in my wildest dreams. Local business newspapers eagerly picked up the scandal, and headlines screamed about Richard's corruption across social media platforms. "CEO embezzles employee wages to fund Mistress's luxury lifestyle," was trending on Twitter and LinkedIn for days. Vanessa publicly dumped Richard in the most humiliating way possible, posting the white BMW for sale online with the brutal caption, "Getting rid of everything that reminds me of lies and stolen money." Office employees whispered in hushed, excited tones as building security guards systematically emptied out Richard's corner office, carrying boxes of his personal belongings like evidence from a major crime scene. I sat peacefully at my desk, working calmly for the first time in 5 years, while the company Richard had controlled with an iron fist slowly and methodically crumbled around him. It was poetic justice in its purest and most satisfying form. Everyone who had witnessed his arrogance over the years was now watching his complete downfall in real time, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone in our industry. But Richard wasn't going down without launching one final, desperate fight. Several weeks later, after hiring an expensive high-profile lawyer, I received official legal papers that made my blood run cold with worry and doubt. He was suing me personally, claiming that I had systematically forged all the documents and fabricated evidence specifically to destroy his reputation and steal money from the company. His attorney was trying to flip the narrative, painting me as a disgruntled employee who had used my technical access to frame an innocent executive. My stomach dropped as I carefully read through his detailed accusations. What if people actually believed his elaborate lies? What if he somehow managed to turn this entire situation around and make me look like the real villain in this story? For a brief moment, serious doubt crept into my mind and I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake by challenging someone with so much power and resources. But then I remembered that I had even more powerful ammunition still hidden in my arsenal of evidence. The IT department's detailed server logs showed precise time-stamped entries of every single transaction. Richard's own IP address and login credentials were tied directly to every single fraudulent transfer over the years, creating an unbreakable digital paper trail. Richard's lawsuit backfired spectacularly in the most public and humiliating way possible. The judge didn't just dismiss his desperate case, she actually scolded him harshly in open court for wasting everyone's valuable time with completely frivolous claims. "Mr. Hale, the evidence against you is overwhelming and absolutely undeniable. This appears to be nothing more than a desperate attempt to avoid accountability for your clearly criminal actions, she said sternly from the bench. His reputation wasn't just damaged now, it was completely and permanently destroyed throughout our entire industry. Even Vanessa testified against him during the legal proceedings, desperate to distance herself from the growing scandal and save her own reputation from further damage. Every single lie Richard tried to spin only dug his metaphorical grave deeper and deeper. The man who had once seemed so powerful and completely untouchable was now a laughingstock across social media and business circles. Justice was being served on a silver platter for everyone to see, and the whole world was watching his complete destruction happen in real time. His downfall was swift, brutal, and entirely of his own making through years of arrogance and criminal behavior. The board moved quickly and decisively to save the company's reputation and distance themselves from Richard's criminal behavior. Richard was fired publicly in a detailed press release that outlined his crimes and emphasized the company's renewed commitment to ethical business practices and employee rights. His substantial company shares were immediately frozen pending a full federal investigation into his financial crimes and potential tax evasion. The board members, who had once feared and respected his authority, now looked at him with obvious disgust and disappointment. At first, they asked me to temporarily oversee the client management system until the dust settled from the scandal. But temporary quickly turned permanent when they realized how smoothly everything ran under my direct supervision. Then came the moment I'd been patiently waiting for. They offered me Richard's former position with something I never expected to see in their eyes: genuine respect and appreciation. Madison, we desperately need someone we can trust to lead this division and restore confidence in our operations, the chairman said formally. My voice barely shook as I looked him directly in the eye and said with quiet confidence, I accept the position and all the responsibility that comes with it. The woman Richard had tried so hard to keep down and demoralize was now his official replacement. The first calculated royalty transfer came through like a lightning bolt of pure justice and vindication. Nearly $2 million, the first calculated payment for just a single day's worth of system usage. I stared at the incredible number on my phone screen, tears burning in my eyes but refusing to fall in public. 5 years of systematic humiliation, sleepless nights worrying about bills, and feeling completely worthless, and now this moment of complete validation. My true professional worth was finally being recognized and compensated, not through empty words or false promises, but through substantial numbers that couldn't be argued with, manipulated, or taken away from me. Richard had spent so much time and energy trying to convince me that I was worthless and replaceable, but the actual market value of my work and intellectual property spoke much louder than his lies and manipulation ever could. This wasn't just money flowing into my account, this was concrete validation that I had always deserved far better treatment than what I received from him and this company. The daily amounts varied slightly based on transaction volume, but they averaged around $2 million, creating a steady stream of wealth that would secure my future forever. Word of my ultimate victory spread through our industry faster than wildfire on social media. Former colleagues from other companies reached out with enthusiastic messages of support and congratulation. Madison, you absolutely deserve every penny of this. What Richard did was completely criminal and you handled it perfectly. Clients who had relied on my technological systems called the company directly, expressing genuine relief that I was now in complete control of the platforms their businesses depended on for daily operations. Meanwhile, Richard's name was trending negatively on LinkedIn and Twitter, not for business success or innovation, but as a cautionary tale about corporate corruption and the consequences of treating employees badly. He had become a complete joke and warning story that other executives would tell to illustrate exactly how not to run a company or treat valuable employees. I had become the inspiring headline story of justice served and perseverance rewarded. The contrast couldn't have been more perfect. He fell as far as I rose, and everyone in our industry was watching this transformation happen in real time through social media and business publications. The story had captured people's imagination because it proved that sometimes, if you're patient and smart enough, the good guys really do win. Richard made one final, pathetic attempt to salvage something from the complete wreckage of his former life. After sending me dozens of desperate emails over several weeks, I finally agreed to meet him at a small, quiet cafe downtown, hoping to get some closure on this chapter of my life. When I arrived at the designated time, I barely recognized the completely broken man sitting hunched over in the corner booth. His expensive designer suits had been replaced by wrinkled, cheap clothes that looked like they came from a discount store. His once confident posture was now hunched and defeated, like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. His eyes looked hollow and desperate, like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. "Madison, please, I'm begging you," he said, his voice cracking with obvious desperation. "I made a terrible mistake that I regret every single day. Vanessa's gone forever, the board hates me, I lost my house, and I've destroyed absolutely everything I worked for my entire career. Can't we work something out here? Some kind of settlement?" I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, looked him directly in the eye, and said calmly, "Richard, you should have thought about the consequences before you decided to steal from me for 5 long years." I stood up from that cafe table with dignity, left exact change for my coffee, and walked away from Richard Hale forever without looking back once. He sat there looking like a completely broken man who finally understood the true weight and consequences of his actions over the years. Outside, the afternoon sun was blindingly bright, and I felt like I was stepping into a completely new chapter of my life filled with possibilities I'd never dared to imagine. My phone buzzed with another notification. Another substantial payment had been automatically deposited into my rapidly growing bank account. The system ran continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and every single day it generated substantial wealth for me that Richard could only dream about now in his current desperate situation. He had lost absolutely everything that mattered to him: his high-paying job, his young mistress, his reputation, his financial security, and his future prospects, while I had gained something truly priceless: complete financial freedom and the deep satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served properly. The tables had turned completely and permanently, and there was absolutely no going back to the old power dynamic that had oppressed me for so long. Now, every morning when I wake up in my comfortable bed, I don't check my account for the numbers anymore. I check it for the reminder. Know your worth, and never let arrogance steal it from you again. I was systematically underpaid, repeatedly humiliated, and completely ignored for 5 long years by a man who thought he could steal from me without facing any consequences. But I never lowered myself to his level or compromised my integrity in the pursuit of revenge. Instead, I methodically gathered irrefutable evidence, played my cards strategically and intelligently, and let Richard's own arrogance and greed destroy him completely. That's the absolute sweetest kind of revenge, justice served without lowering myself. I learned my true worth and value through this experience, and now the entire world pays me exactly what I deserve every single day. If this incredible story of ultimate workplace revenge inspired you, drop a comment below sharing your own experiences with toxic bosses or workplace injustice. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a professional setting? Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be paid fairly for their hard work and contributions, and subscribe to our channel for more absolutely jaw-dropping stories of justice being served and karma catching up with bad people. Trust me, you won't want to miss the amazing stories we have coming next.